Hey, M3 Ian here, and I just got off a video with Ryann Jorban, a district attorney in LA. She's been a friend for several years, huge involvement in the Noble, and she just trains and encourages and challenges bankers and law enforcement, but just a wonderful human being. So, in this episode, in this show, you're going to get to hear about Ryan's why she works, a little bit about her background of becoming an attorney and just her home life. Everything's beautiful, but then actually some really cool cases. Her first case and some just the way she views as a prosecutor crime. And we get a little bit on human trafficking, specifically labor trafficking, but you're just going to be encouraged. And her parting thoughts, I don't want to give a preview of what it is, her parting thoughts about how to live a purposeful life. It's just beautiful. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Bree, for your help. And thank you, family, for tuning into M3 and being a part of this mission, music, and media journey. I know I sure look forward to these episodes and these conversations, and I hope you too. Don't forget, please check out I'm on His Side, the music I released about a month ago. Would love to see more folks listening to that. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy hanging out with Ryan. Hey, Ryan. Bye-bye. It is wonderful to be with you, my friend. I told you, I think it was last year, that I wanted to be one of your podcasts for the year, and because you had a goal. I think it was a personal goal to do a certain number of kind of podcasts, if you will, if I remember right. And I'm thrilled to be one of those.
Yeah, it was definitely an ask, and so far you're the only one who's answered, so I appreciate you answering that
Well,
request.
we need Ryan. You're gonna hear that. We need Ryan on more of these, like, because it is amazing. The stories you have and the experience you have is just. I mean, I've just loved. You've been such a huge part of. I know the Noble community, just like the educating and encouraging and bringing insights to all things on the trafficking side, and then just to have gotten to know you outside of the Noble through the Clapham world. I just see you. You're just one of those people that have just you are so gracious with your time and your expertise, leaning in to help, just believing in the mission you do, and just being just a wonderful human being and an
Oh
expert.
man, I'm
It's
gonna
just beautiful.
blush.
It's just beautiful, honestly. Like it's funny. I do get a hey, do you know Ryan Jordan by chance? I get that every once in a while. I'm like, oh, I sure do. She's amazing. So you've been that since day one, and just thank you for supporting and believing in what you do so much. Really is beautiful.
It's easy to believe in. It's
Yeah.
it's not it's not a stretch to believe in what we would do.
Well, let's start off with who is Ryan? So I don't know where you want to go with this, but let's talk about you.
Yeah. I don't know where to go with that. Well, as we were kind of chatting before this, we were talking about I'm a mom very much first. I have two kids, one who's a high school junior and one who's a high school senior. So my entire world is college and college applications and college, looking for the right college and what kind of colleges can we afford and, what colleges are going to give my kids the best start in life, not necessarily the most prestigious, but the ones that will make them good, whole, round people. Um, because that's a very important part of who I am. So, professionally, I've been a prosecutor for 28 years in Los Angeles County. My joke is I started at 3, and I'm going to stick with that. Throughout my career, I've prosecuted primarily focused on the most vulnerable, protecting the most vulnerable in our community, whether that's a child or disabled individuals, victims of sexual assaults and violence, domestic violence victims. And in the last 8 years or so, I've gotten to specialize in helping our vulnerable communities when they've been defrauded or had their their very livelihood stolen from them, either by people who steal money that they have saved up for years to make sure that their kids are safe and secure, or whether it's somebody who's just trying to put food on the table and working and being abused, trying to do that. And so it's been a very blessed experience. Like any job, there's been a couple years where I've been like, whew, not really enjoying this, but the last 8 years have been amazing. And, uh, and I could not ask for a better way to, um, kind of run full tilt into towards my retirement. In fact, I'm at that point where I'm like, well, how many more years can I do this before they force me out? Because I love this work and I really don't want to stop. And so I'm going to have to, I don't know, drink a lot of caffeine and do a lot of cardio so that I can stay in the game as long as possible. But I am with LA County and I work for our consumer protection division, but I run two units. One's the economic justice and the other's the labor justice unit. And those work on fraud that is focused at our most vulnerable communities. People who are poor, people who are, elderly people, people who maybe have attempted to give their families better lives by coming to this country and working here. People who have put all of their money into a family home and then people try to take it from them either through fraud or I've been working a lot with the families who lost their homes to the fires, especially in Eaton Canyon, where a lot of, there was a lot of communities, a lot of people there who that family home had been owned for a couple generations and really held on to all of the hopes of those families. They paid for college, they paid for healthcare, they were homes for multiple generations and they've lost everything. So protecting those people against fraud and people who would take advantage of them. So yeah, it just doesn't get better than that. Um,
Well, I'd love to come back to the fire in the LA area. That would be interesting. I just think for me, I just think we haven't. I don't know if they had home insurance or anything, but it would be just interesting to understand how people are getting taken advantage of. But maybe before we go there, so you've been a practicing lawyer. What made you go into like focus on vulnerable populations and helping that side versus the fancy,
Making
firms that,
money.
yeah, well,
Making money so my kids could pick any college. We didn't have to worry about whether they got a merit or scholarships. Yeah. So I went to Michigan Law School, go blue. It was a really good law school and almost everyone I knew went to a big firm in New York or Chicago or LA and heck, some of them started out, 28 years ago making more money than I do now, right? But I came from my mom was a single parent. She was a school teacher. She was a teacher for 40 years in the LA Unified School District. My dad had been a social worker. Um, and my mom was the first in her generation to go to college. And, I watched her not only teach, but parent child after child after child. She worked in some of the poorest areas in LA. I had an unofficial foster sister who lived with us for a couple years. I never knew this when I was a kid. She was just my big sister and I adored her. But she had to leave her home because of some violence and her mother not being able to take care of her. And my mom took her in. And I think, it was in the 70s, right? So, like, I don't know what was going on there because I don't think it was ever official. But she needed a place to live and she needed somebody to love her. And my mom taught me that family has to do a lot more with showing up for people than whose DNA we share. Um, and uh, and I always enjoyed that. I always enjoyed having just these groups of people who showed up for each other. I have a memory of not getting cast in a show when I was in high school, and my two friends showed up on my doorstep with a milkshake and French fries from McDonald's. And this was, a lot of years ago, and I still distinctly remember that because that's how you show up for people. You show up the way they need you, not the way you need to be seen, right? And they showed up for me that day the way I needed them. And my mom did a lot of that. And so when I started law school, I thought, well, maybe I'll get my social work and law degree. Like I'll do a dual degree. And Michigan had a dual program, which is why I was looked at them. And then I went to law school and I went, you know what? I am not a social worker. I am just I got way too much, get annoyed too easily. And I like to solve problems and have them stay solved. And social work is about the long game, and I'm about I'm my husband calls me a hammer, and he's not wrong. Um, and so but I took a year off in between undergrad and law school because I was tired. I was one of those students, we were just talking about our hard charging kids, and I was one of them. I was this all A's, and I worked, and I had, I was did all kinds of activities, and I took a year off, and I worked in a preschool. I taught 2.5-year-olds, and I worked at a religious school as a secretary, and then I worked at a day school as a secretary, and I worked a lot with kids, and I loved it. Um, and I knew I was going to law school. I'd already gotten in. I was just waiting. I took a year off, and the only lawyers I met who did not say, "Oh, don't go to law school. You don't want to be a lawyer," in that year were two moms at my preschool, and both of them were deputy district attorneys for LA County. And they both said, it's the best job on earth. And so my first summer, in between first year and second year of law school, I volunteered for our office. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I tried nonprofit the following summer, and it didn't ring true for me. And I know when I decided to be a DA is when I thought I'm too soft to be a DA. And I thought that my first summer. And then I was sitting in a courtroom, and they were sentencing uh, a group of men who had murdered this young man. It was this random attack where they had literally beaten this man to death. And he had gone to run errands for his mom. He'd like gone to the store for his mom. And his mom starts talking about losing him. And I start crying, and I thought, oh, you can't be a DA. You're crying. And I look around the room, and every prosecutor in the room was crying. Every prosecutor in the room was crying. Judge wasn't crying, defense attorneys weren't crying, but every DA in the room was crying. And I thought, oh, okay, this is who I am. I am someone who will fight, and then I can cry. And so I've done that. I've done that for 28 years. I've fought and I've cried. And when you stop crying, I think is when you stop doing this work, because it's when, I mean, you have to have some boundaries and some distance, but you still got to be able to let the humans who are going through this reach your heart. And so, yeah, that's why. And I've never, there's been times, I think there's times in everyone's life, right? Um, I mean, I know you're religious, and then, you know, um, as am I, different, ends of the Judeo-Christian ethic, but, same God, same belief system. And, we're taught you're going to doubt and you're going to question. And even the best things have to have hardness, or we don't know when we're in the middle of the best stuff, right? But it's been an amazing journey, and I would not have given up what I've gotten to do and the people I've gotten to help. I have these occasionally you get a thank you note, and the thank you notes, when you're having that day, reading that thank you note, that means a lot, because you know that somebody out there hurts less because of what you did. So yeah, I don't know if that even answered the question,
It
but
was
there you
so
go.
perfect. It was so perfect. And I just think and it's so beautiful that you were able to realize that early in your career that I want to live a purpose-filled life and be my whole self and combine my occupation with, it's so beautiful. And, lawyers a lot of times get bad raps for all the stereotypical reasons, but I am so blessed to be able to know folks like yourself that got into a needed field with your whole heart and your whole person and use everything you can to kind of, like you said, protect the vulnerable. Let's talk about that for a minute. So when you talk about the kind of cases and you see, like, do you remember your first case? Do you remember the first?
I
You,
do. I remember
you
my
do?
first trial. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think probably every trial lawyer remembers their first trial. So when you're starting in LA County, it's the largest prosecutorial agency in the nation. It's
It's
probably
got
the
to be.
largest in the world, single office. And so they throw you into misdemeanor court. So it's low level crimes, And we joke that the reason they give those to baby DAs is because we're the only ones who will take them seriously, right? And we take them super seriously. Like, you work that case. Like later, I would try felonies that I think I did put less work into. And my first case was I lost my first case. Like we should start with that, right? I lost my first case. And on felonies, I have a really good record. I've only lost one and I've only hung another. Okay. So, felonies, I did great. Misdemeanors, I lost my first case.
So you're the one that the
And
other side doesn't want to see.
yeah,
That's what it sounds like.
well, the thing is just as a little aside, if you're a prosecutor and you're doing your job right and you're doing it ethically, you shouldn't bring a case that you're not very, very sure that you have enough evidence to win. Because my ethical duty is to do justice. And I have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I can't do that, I should not proceed with the case. And I have multiple times over my career not proceeded with a case when I've realized that I don't have enough evidence to prove it. Doesn't mean the person didn't do it, but I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and I take that very seriously. I serve my country. I serve my community. And that includes never ever doing something that is unethical or is for the wrong reason. And sometimes that means, there's a saying, it's better than 100 guilty go free than one innocent man die. And, I would really prefer not to let those 100 guilty people go free. And I work really hard not to, and to find a way to, to find the evidence and do the right thing. But if I can't do it the right way, the ethical way, that is not where my moral center is. And that is not what I believe in. So, um, that, so putting that aside, this guy was guilty. My first case, he was totally guilty. My defendant was a repo man, and my victim owned this, old beater of a car, but spent $400 to put rims on this car 28 years ago. Okay. And then he stopped making the payments on the rims. And I have to admit, my victim was a real jerk and kind of a, and like not a very nice man. And the repo guy came across pretty good. And he took a sledgehammer to take the rims off, or, some sort of mallet or something. And our victim started yelling at him and said, don't do, you can't take my rims. You can't take my rims. And the repo guy got mad at him and threw the mallet through the window of the car, shattering the windshield. And so we were trying him for vandalism. And the defense was, well, the victim was in the car and was driving at me. So it was self-defense, right? And I proved that that was impossible because the entire seat of the car was filled with glass and there was no glass on the sidewalk. And the police officer testified to that, right? Not our victim, who was kind of a jerk, but the police officer. Yeah, all the glass was in there. There was no glass on the floor. So there was no way, if he was sitting in the car when the thing was thrown through and the glass got on him, that he then got out of the car and there would be no glass on the ground, no glass on his clothes, no glass on anything. And I lost. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, there's literally no way that he was in the car. And I remember the defense attorney, Justine. I remember her. I won't use her last name because I don't want to out her privacy, but Justine, who was just lovely to me. And I said, I don't understand. And she said, oh, Ryan, he was guilty, but your guy was worse than my guy and they didn't like him. And there was nothing you could have done, because juries are going to look at who the competing interests are. And if the crime's not serious, they're going to see their own type of justice. And it was a really good lesson for me, that I could do my job. I could do it really well. I could even, I mean, the evidence was, you know, in, incontrovertible. Is that the word? There was no question about the evidence, right? And I could still lose. And that had nothing to do with me because the system is built around having 12 people listen from the community. And they're supposed to decide just on the law and the facts, but sometimes they just decide that this is not who they want to win in their community, that they have a standard they want their community to stand up to. And that my job is to present the facts and to be ethical and to do my job. And then the community has to decide how they're going to let that play out. It was such a good lesson. And man, once you've lost one, you're a lot less scared. So it was really good to lose your first one because you're like, well, it can only go up from here. And it did.
It's I don't admit this often, but I was I did a lot of pre-law classes in undergrad. And I remember this one case about Arnold Schwarzenegger in the LA Hollywood area. And let me know if this rings a bell at all. And I may be
Hmm.
wrong. So if you're hearing this and I'm wrong because again, this was many years ago. But I remember before he came, this is what I remember. Before he came to the States, he ran a security company. Like, and he
Hmm.
brought like Austrian security or whatever common practices to the States, and all the Hollywood stars were using his security company. Basically, what he was doing is on the walls around these celebrities, he put pieces of glass.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so then what happened was, and again, I think this was Arnold Schwarzenegger. What happened was, is there was a robber that sued him because when he climbed the wall, he didn't, because it wasn't a common practice in the U.S. He didn't have I don't know what the right word is. He didn't have no preconception that he actually got stuck on the wall, and the police had to come take him off the wall because the glass was impaling him,
Oh,
and he sued, even though he was going in to rob the house, he sued the security company, which I think was Arnold Schwarzenegger's company, and Arnold had to go and actually, or this company, I should say Arnold, I keep saying him, but I'm 90% sure I'm 100% sure that's what I remember. Um, and he had to go and remove every client he ever did in all of LA because
it wasn't the standard
it wasn't the
of,
standard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
that was,
crazy. Well, you know, you hear about that, like, right? You leave a ladder out and the guy tries to break in and it's an attractive nuisance and you get sued. I mean, our laws can be really stupid. Don't get me wrong. You know, they can definitely be very stupid, but that's pretty funny. You know, it's like, well, all right, you may have had to take the glass out, but the guy did get, you know, impaled. So I think
yeah, yeah,
maybe
I didn't
justice
think
was
about that.
done on both
Yeah, there you
sides
go.
there.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. It's, that's I guess, and so then I love it because your story starts with unbelievable parents that influence you to a way to look at life in general, to care, and then learning about your cases. And now you've worked on some amazing cases, especially in LA. I imagine. I mean, like you said, it's one of the largest. And honestly, there's always news about LA and things going on in
Yeah, I
LA.
try to
You've
avoid, you know, those cases with, you know, people who TMZ cares about, like, because we definitely are a TMZ kind of, you know, prosecutor's office, and can always tell. I do work in our our headquarters, which is downtown, and so a lot of the big celebrity cases end up downtown, and so you can always tell when some celebrity is on a jury or a witness or is being prosecuted because you can't get into our parking lot because there's all these, like,
there's
you know,
cameras.
video trucks on the sidewalk, and I'm like, why do the TV guys get to park on the sidewalk? But they do. And like last month, we're right across the street from the federal courthouse. And so, you know, there was press there the entire time because they were all waiting for Mark Zuckerberg to come in and testify about how Meta and social media is addictive. And, you know, he lost that case, $8 million of, you know, a teenager saying, I have been using social media since I was 6 and I am addicted. I was using it 16 hours a day, you know, and I've seen, you know, like I've been through kind of as media has become more and more powerful, right? In how we do everything. You know, when I started, we weren't using PowerPoint, right? I was creating charts on pieces of paper and putting them up. And now, you know, I can create a video on my computer for a case. And so it's been an arc of a career. It's been amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going anywhere. I love this job. And I may have mentioned I have 2 kids starting college, so I'm not going anywhere. But, but it yeah, it's just the justice system is a very interesting system, and finding the good people in it has been, something I've worked on all my career. But really these last 8 years, meeting all these people in this ecosystem of labor trafficking, labor exploitation, human exploitation, and how to so one of my big things is doing as minimal harm as possible when I work on these cases, because you don't meet me as a prosecutor if you're having a good day, right? Like, and so how do we as the justice system provide justice without, well, not without harm, because there's no way to do that, but with the minimal amount of harm for the maximum amount of community and individual justice and safety, right?
Mhm.
And so we balance that a lot. Like when I was saying that there have been cases where I'm like, I can't prosecute it because I don't have beyond a reasonable doubt, I did a lot of child sexual assaults. And one of the hardest things to do would be to talk to the parent of a child who had been sexually assaulted, who I couldn't prosecute the case for. And it's not that the child was lying. The child was absolutely telling the truth. But I was not going to put a 6-year-old on the stand unless I believed that at the end of it, there would be a conviction. And I was not going to put a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old through what was going to happen to them on the stand if I did not think that there was going to be a very high probability of conviction, because the harm to the individual, the harm to the victim, and that was true for adult victims too. It's just, um, it was a lot harder to explain it to a parent than it was to a victim. The victims got it. When I said to them, I'm not going to put you through this because I don't think we have a good chance of winning. And you deserve to not have to be traumatized for no reason, you know? They got that better than when I had to say to a mom, I can't do something about the person who hurt your kid. And I didn't do these cases when I had kids. Like by the time I had kids, I was doing domestic violence and child abuse. And pretty early on, my boss said to me, "Go raise your kids. You can come back. Go. You don't need these images in your head while you were babies." She was right. I mean, it was just, I was sad at the time because I really liked the work I was doing, but she was right. Um, and she ended up giving me this new job, and it was the best job I've ever had, and I've told her that. But, you know, understanding what the system can do to a victim and recognizing that and honoring that needs to be integral to everything we do in this community. And as I have worked with people like you at the Noble, the network, Clapham, just all of these amazing other government agencies, all of the other prosecutors I work with up and down across the states, from Minnesota to, New Mexico to uh, North Dakota. I mean, we all, I have seen our entire mind shift in law enforcement and prosecution to minimize harm to the people who have already been harmed. We used to insist, you have to help us or we're not going to help you. And I've watched that shift. Now, I've always been at the forefront of, we're going to shift that. I'm going to help you first. And if you can help me, great. If you can't, that's fine too. I honor that. Um, it's not your job. It's my job to get justice, and it's not my job to destroy you to do that. But Yeah, telling a parent that you're not gonna be able to do something, and now that I'm a parent, I I'm glad I wasn't a parent back then, 'cause I think I might have taken cases to it. I might have been tempted to take cases that I should not have, and I'm glad I was able to not do that, 'cause I had that kind of ignorance.
And so you're not only seeing the parents in some cases on the victim side, but then also the parents on potentially the offender side or the
Mhm.
perpetrator. I remember during the same pre-law stuff, I volunteered at a juvenile detention facility, and I remember seeing all the kids in this juvie, and it was amazing to see these kids in this lockdown capacity and in lines. And then there was a building where, when they're getting ready to phase out, they go into a house situation where basically they are kind of learning to reintegrate. And I remember there was one young man there who maybe was 15 or 16, young boy. He was a boy, 15 or 16, but there was no room in the major facility. So for some reason he was allowed in this home, but he was going to be tried as an adult because of he did a shooting around a mall. And to see this boy, who was all boy in this environment with other
Mhm.
boys, and I started thinking about one, his life, because he clearly did it, and he was like, and I don't know where it ended up, and can't speak intelligent, but just to see also as a parent now these kids and we talked social media, we talked the video games that are just
Mhm.
creating this mindset that is, it's got to be, I can imagine being exposed to parents on both sides of the equation. I would imagine there's some parents where it's like they created a toxic environment where these children get raised up, and then I imagine there's some that you see that basically are the opposite, where a child has been groomed or something helping happen
Yeah,
externally. You have to you're exposed to a lot of difficult things.
I am. I am, and I have seen parents watch their child, you know, go back into lockup to not come out. And, um, some of them, my empathy is low for because they have, like you said, made choices that, and here's the thing. I don't think anybody is, um, com- can be divorced from what they have experienced growing up. And I think trauma and all of that can absolutely shape and numb you to the world around you so that you don't make choices with the full understanding of how you're going to hurt someone. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of people who've gone through that trauma who haven't made those choices. I don't know what keeps them from making those choices, right? Um, I don't know why some people choose what they choose and some people choose something else. What I do know is that the pain on both sides is absolutely real. And so, not being part of a system where we attempt to heal the trauma, or like what I've done with the NOVA, where we're trying to teach people to see the red flags so we can maybe stop it before it happens or as it's happening, try to minimize that trauma. That's key. Like, that's one of the things I think I like so much about what I've been doing the last 8 years is that there's a much more proactive aspect of it. I think that where the real burnout happens, because I did start to burn out on the violent crime, is that you can't stop it because there's nothing proactive about what you're doing. Everything you're doing is reactive. Everything you're doing is reactive. Um, and I still do. I mean, most of what I'm doing as a prosecutor is reactive. My other side of my hat, right, is that I'm a consultant and I teach and I help people like you who are doing this amazing work to try to fix not a broken system, but a system that could work better for humanity, right? And that's super proactive, right? Let's train people. Let's teach them how to see this stuff when it's happening. let's teach them how to see it so we can stop it while it's happening, not years afterwards when we hear about it. Um, let's teach law enforcement and prosecutors and regulators and nonprofits how to use the justice system to protect victims without making victims carry the weight of a case. So we prosecute somebody's being sexually trafficked in commercial sex. Okay, let's prosecute that case as a labor case, so that the victim never has to talk about the horrible sexual violence that they've experienced. Or even better, I do it as a financial case and they don't have to testify at all. I just, show that they've committed tax fraud, take their money, give it to the victim, and there is no trauma. And the victim gets stabilized and the victim gets help. And then if the victim feels like part of that help is going to be part of the prosecution, great. Come in. I will support you through that, but I will take you wherever you are and I will help you no matter what you do for us. And that, I think, is why the last 8 years have been kind of miraculous for me, is I finally found a way that I can both be the hammer, but also fix the problem before it's broken. This doesn't get better than that.
Do you see? I love where you went here. Do you see um, others that are in positions like yourself, because you have so much knowledge and insights that you've gained from being involved on one side of these events and cases, and it exposed to the types of underbelly of crime that some in the private sector don't. I mean, as a banker, it's transactions, it's dollar amounts,
Mhm.
and so do you see folks that are in your similar situation? I know like Mark Evans over in law enforcement. He's a wonderful kind of detective in Las Vegas that is taking what he sees and trying to train banks, and similar to what you're are you seeing? Because I'm seeing folks that are in your, I'm seeing a wave of people that have that exposure come and want to do what you're doing, train. Are you seeing the idea of the system getting more preventative and proactive? Because you figure if you can stop the small crime, it doesn't maybe manifest to the big crime that ends up causing the big damage. Are you seeing a move? Are you feeling like it? Or are we still at the early stages where your colleagues are wanting to be a part of that?
I think my colleagues do. I think the problem we have with preventative, it's a lot harder to measure, it's a lot harder to see, and it's a lot the resources for prevention actually are more efficient. If you prevent a problem, it costs less than fixing it. But do we take the money to prevent the problem away from making sure that that 15-year-old child who's hurt has, you know, I guess it's always like, okay, yes, I preach labor trafficking, labor exploitation. Like when we work on that problem, it helps the entire community. It helps our financial systems. It helps our government systems. It helps our humans. It helps business. I mean, there's just no real downside to it, except if I put my money in that, do I have less money to help the 15-year-old who's being sold for sexual, commercial sex on the street? And the answer is yes, because there's finite resources. And so we, I think, as a community, respond and react to the most underbelly of an item, right? For good reason, but we're not willing to spend what it's going to take to keep that from happening in the way we need to, because that is harder to measure. That is mushier. It's not, um, this person hurt a child and I put them in custody for 20 years. Like we understand that. Um, I housed, this young woman who has been trafficked, and I gave her methadone, and I, you know, paid for whatever. And yeah, she went back out and she went back into the life because she's still working on getting there. That's a harder sell, right? It's necessary. It's it's what really has to happen if we're going to fix what's broken. but it's a harder sell, and I think that's the problem.
So interesting. I was we're trying to set up a national anti-scam center. It's a little side project that I've got going on. But as
Little side
I'm
project.
yeah, and I as I'm um exposed. I was at the United Nations last week, and it was I wasn't sure why I was there. It was about global education system and how it needs to be fixed. It was a fascinating day, and I got to have so many amazing meetings about the scam center. But as I was sitting in some of these meetings, the interconnectivity about what makes somebody vulnerable, lack of education, poverty, they end up getting into
Mhm,
selling themselves or scams
mhm,
because there's a root cause. And so
mhm.
if we're in the response bucket of these crimes and all the time just trying to go and say, I rescued you, I put you away, that kind of thing, we're not hitting the root of the problem, which is there's organized crime rings that are operating, and whether and there's evil in the world. But then
Mhm.
there's a lot of even some of the people that are caught in those organized crime rings, they got in because they didn't have any other alternative.
Yeah,
So poverty, whatever it's going to be, there's lack of education, lack of home lives, the trauma. The root is where we've got to fix. Otherwise, to your point, you're going to have re-exploitation happen, whether it's scams or and the trafficking side. So it goes back to even just labor. The root of that is, well, it has to do with, in a lot of cases, I hear it justified, even locally, the conversation has been justified, because there's not enough people to employ, or there's not enough margins or whatever. Like there's all these
right.
mental justifications we do. So the root of the problem maybe is a little bit. So if we start solving those, I don't know, we have to do it in tandem with caring for victims and putting them away. But to your point, there's less resources and people understand less about putting our resources on the front end of the problem. Left of boom,
Yeah,
I think is the security term or whatever, but or the military term. But yeah, the left of the events.
yeah, and I think that's a huge part of it because we know what vulnerabilities put people at risk for exploitation, and you name the exploitation, the vulnerabilities are gonna be pretty much the same. Whether it's forced criminality through gang activity because there is no structure, there is no safety in their communities, the only way that they can be safe is to be part of the gang. They've grown up in that and they don't I mean, I used to say, I wouldn't join a gang because I grew up with the idea that the way you became successful is you went to college, you got an education, you got a job, you did the right thing, right? But what if I had grown up in a community where joining the gang, protecting your community, taking care of business, and that was success? What's why would I be any less successful if the success was defined differently than my middle class bringing upbringing defined it for me, right? Like we have this assumption that everybody sees success the same way we do. That we were raised, right? And for kids and people who are in vulnerable situations, success is going to look really different. And what their pathways and what their realistic ability to access that success is going to look really different. And I don't know that we do a good job always with recognizing that. I always say you have to meet people where they are, not where you want them to be.
Mhm.
Um, And we don't do a great job with people in vulnerability of understanding where they are and trying to meet them there in a way that is meaningful to them and not degrading and not paternalistic, but really just saying, I see what you are dealing with. Here are some options and making the options real and making the options accessible because social services are not particularly accessible. If you've ever tried to call, oh my god, I remember trying to fix my mother's social security when she had had a stroke and I had to go to the social security office. I am an attorney. I work in government for 25 years and it took me 4 hours and I knew what I was doing. That's not a system that we can ask a vulnerable person to navigate and get better.
Navigate the system and then change our mind, like change the way we view things. I know just for me, in various things around corporate America, religion, all these things of like just this when it starts coming and we're asking them to think differently about the way they've been taught from a child of what success looks like, for example,
Right.
or all these retirement, all these constructs we have to then start viewing them differently. I mean, some of them are just earth shattering and it just takes so long time to just that are not around the cultural identity that comes with being raised in an environment at a young age. These are things that have been taught to me since I was an adult. And so it's really interesting for me to look at how hard those big mindset shifts have been in my life, let alone
Mhm.
us going to a child that was raised in an environment from birth and has learned behaviors and what, to your point, what's successful. I can't
And
imagine what we're,
survival,
it's
right? I
survival.
mean,
Yeah.
that's how they've learned to survive.
Wow.
I I learned to survive by getting A's and B's
Yeah.
because I didn't have to worry about whether or not there was gonna be a gunshot through my window,
Yeah.
you know? Um, that's a very different lifestyle than the and I see it, you know? Um, again, people have free choice.
Yep. Yep.
God gave us free choice,
Yep.
but there is coercion and duress inherent in how and where we live. And our choices, if we live in a safe, middle class neighborhood with enough food and a house, our choices are broader, you know? Ah, nothing used to piss me off more, and excuse the language, than some kid who grew up in middle class America who had all these opportunities and would play act as a gangster. Because I'm like, you didn't have to do that to survive. You're doing that because of some music video that you watched or
Movies is
movies or
yeah,
some video game or
yeah,
some
yeah.
other reason that you think that's super cool. And who knows? I mean, they may have been experiencing stuff at home, but their opportunities, their choices, their access to other options, to adults who would listen to them, to school systems that worked, was immense. And they chose to ignore it. And those were the people I really had an issue with. The kid who grew up in a gang community and didn't have those kind of, you know, options, and they still chose, and they chose the wrong path. I understand that a lot better. And I had a lot more empathy for them and their families. But, you're wearing a Rolex and you're, beating people up. I'm going to have a big issue with that because that's just you choosing to make the world a worse place because and you have a vast amount of choices you can make that aren't that.
And then you layer on mental health, genetic
Mhm.
things, physical health, all the complications that have polluted society and all the things, and it makes your job super tough, super interesting because you don't know what mix that you're. Um, wow. Can we talk? I've got a meeting this afternoon about something you were really helpful on is detecting trafficking around the World Cup and scams, and I've got a meeting
Mhm.
this afternoon on it. And if we could, because LA is a big, it's going to be a big, in like just a couple weeks, right? It's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of things going on in your district. Um, can we talk just a little bit about like the whole problem of this trafficking problem that's going on and maybe even scams, organized crime, just your thoughts on that. What do you see related to that? And we could use the World Cup. We don't have to. And is it intentional organized crime or is it just laziness? Like what do you see when we start talking about these problems? What's
It's
your mind?
it's funny. One of the things that I've kind of developed as I've prosecuted is when you first start prosecuting, everybody just seems like a bad guy. But you start to realize no, there's people who made a mistake, screwed up, and they're not really probably going to do it again, right? And then there's people who don't care if they hurt somebody else because they need what they need and they're going to get it no matter what. Okay. And that's the majority of criminals, even the worst criminals, even people who kill people. Sometimes it's just that that's what they need in the moment, right? But then there's a small section of just truly evil people who enjoy hurting others or watch the hurt that they cause and are like, yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. That's a price that I don't have to pay. What shocked me is how much more of that banal evil I see in fraud and trafficking. And yes, there's people. So my expertise is in labor trafficking, though I did sex trafficking for years. So I have that as well. But right now, what I specialize in is labor and labor exploitation. And I see some of that, people who don't pay wages because they're bad at it. Small business, it's hard. Da, da, da. I don't care about those people. Like that's what regulatory agencies are for. They pay a fine, they learn better, they move on, right? But there is a huge group of people who just don't care if they are defrauding and stealing and building businesses and whole economic systems on the backs of victims. And when we have something like the World Cup, and because we have the World Cup and then the Super Bowl and then the Olympics, like that's all any of us are talking about right now, right? I have been on so many stakeholder listening groups, right? Where we talk about what we're going to do. And I'm like, we're going to do what we always do. We're just going to do it with, less resources and more outsiders saying you should do it this way. And then we're going to do it the way we always do it because we're actually quite good at it. Um, but what I recognize is that these become opportunities that draw in this kind of, evil uh, group of people who see it as an opportunity to to take as much as they can. Um, and um, we see that a lot in the labor trafficking world is this assumption that if somebody is especially a low wage worker, undocumented, um, you know, poor, uneducated, that they don't have the same requirement of dignity that we demand when we work. Um, and I find that really offensive. Um, I think there's human dignity is very important. Um, we are what God made us, all of us. So why do I deserve more dignity than the person sitting next to me? Um, and I think, we see it in certain industries just generally. And then when we have something like these games and there's a demand increase, at hotels, at restaurants, selling things on the street, construction, we have to find those workers. And margins are low. People want to make a lot of money off of this. They expect to make a lot of money. I think that's part of it too. Is like this expectation that we're, supposed to make a lot of money in our careers and stuff. And it's like, how about you just make enough to be comfortable, have a good life, give your kids a good life? But do you really need more money than you could spend? Like, is that really, and I sound like a communist. I'm not. I'm a big believer in capitalism, but um, I really like people who make a lot of money and then give a lot of it away because, I hear that all the time at Eagle. Make enough money that you can give a lot of it away, right? Because there's only so much we can do with it. And what we do with our money is way more important than how much of it we make. And, but there is a group of people who really see being able to cheat people as a success measurement. I live in, LA, and we are the fraud center of the universe because there are people here who truly believe that if they can steal your money, that's a you problem, not a them problem, because you were dumb enough to let them steal your money. And there are people who believe that if you are poor or less educated than them, or a different color than you are, or from a different country, or were not lucky enough to be born in the United States, and you come here to try to make sure your children are not pressed into gangs or raped or killed, that they deserve to be mistreated because they are less than me. And I just don't see that. And so um, I love being able to take on those people who think that. and make them toe a line. It's just really it's like I said, I never would have been a good social worker. I just I believe in punishment at a certain extent. Like there are people who have to stand up to these people, and being able to be one of them is pretty friggin' amazing.
Thank you for what you do.
Oh,
We went so many beautiful places in this conversation, and it just was so much fun. Known you for a little while now, and I loved hearing the case stories and just more about your heart. I've known that since the first time we met, and again, just goes back to just who you are and your passion. And I learn from you every time we talk. And thank you for teaching the financial sector
oh yeah,
about the
love it.
truths. My goodness, it's amazing what I see you doing now. Any thoughts for kind of, I don't know, my family that's listening? Any thoughts for like just related to, because I think it's so easy when you watch TV of how bad the world is. I think that's one of the things. Like what are your just how do you look at the world, and whether it's a hey, you need to protect yourself, or just what are your thoughts from your lens, whether you're living in LA or not?
Yeah, yeah, right. Um, I think one of the things that being a DA has taught me is to question my assumptions, right? Being a human has taught me that. God, being a parent has totally taught me that, right? Um, I am a Democrat living in a blue state, right? And I work with mainly Democrats living in a blue state. Um, and when I started to work with in the anti-trafficking and counter-trafficking movement, there are people from across the spectrum, politically, religiously, um, but at their heart, we're all ethically and morally in the same place. And I have had to change my mind and open my eyes and recognize that um, I don't know what people think, and I don't know what people do, and I don't hold the the mantle of being right alone, right? And at first, it kind of bothered me because I thought, oh, I'm not a very good person. I've been kind of judgy. And now I love it. I love when my assumptions are challenged because what it reminds me is most of us in the world are really good people. And if I talked to a prosecutor the other day who is leaving the office and going into private practice, and she was terrified. She's like, am I selling out? Am I going to be able to help people? And I said to her, do everything with the heart and the kindness and the sense of justice that you've done your job for the past 15 years, and you'll not do it wrong. Don't compromise what you know is right for the job. Do the job the way you know it's right. And I think that's kind of what I would like to leave people with. And I hope my kids learn this is do whatever you do with the right heart and the understanding that we're anytime we help someone else, that just makes the world a better place. And and it doesn't matter what the job is then. It just matters, with what mind and heart and work you put into it. So, don't yeah, I mean, yeah, protect yourself, but maybe with a very willingness to know that you can learn from somebody else or you're not gonna know the perfect way to do things. I don't know.
Right, that's beautiful. That is beautiful. It's so perfect. And I just, as you were talking about that, I just know that's been so much of my journey too. And well, God bless you and everything you're doing. And thank you for being such a positive force for good, not just in LA, but just it's having global impact. It's changing hearts and minds of bankers and law enforcement. And you just truly are a force for so much good. So thank you,
Oh,
Ryan,
that's
for
so
being my
sweet.
friend.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
for
hope
hanging
so.
out.
It's a real blessing to be able to do anything that
If you
makes the
enjoyed
world
the
better.
M3 show and you want to watch all the new releases, click subscribe. You know how it works. Secondly, if you want to support my nonprofit, the one I established to fight human crimes like child exploitation and human trafficking and scams, click the QR code, scan it, make a donation. That would be hugely appreciated. And if you want to stay updated on all the music, again, I release music regularly. Go and click that link in the description. And we're on every major platform: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. You can look up Ian Mitchell. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the support. And I look forward to being with you next time. I am not done yet.